Welcome to the Grow, Create, Sip podcast, where we chat about growing and creating your own herbal medicine from common herbs, as well as how to craft tasty herbal infusions. This podcast is available in all podcast players, along with the video version on YouTube.
Every week, we will take some of your questions as our topic of the week and get you the answers that you are looking for. Feel free to leave questions below this video, or if you are listening, send them to us at howdy@farmhouseteas.com.
Welcome to our very first video podcast. I don't think we've ever done one of these, and we'll see what our plan ends up being down the road. But today I want to introduce to you a very special guest and a dear friend of mine, Carolyn Thomas from Homesteading family. She's married to Josh, and they have 10 beautiful children. And we love getting to visit with their family. They're so much fun. And we just love chatting with them. So I think you'll enjoy our little chat today with Carolyn. We're going to talk about freeze drying because I'm super excited. She has written a book that is about to come out. I'm going to be just stocking my mailbox waiting for it to show up because I saw that it's on the way very soon. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Carolyn Thomas of Homesteading family. Hi, Carolyn. It's good to see you again.
Hey, Cian. It's great to get to be here. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. You know, this time of year, it's harvest season. And so I feel a little bit tired, like especially as we get to the end of September, even the beginning of October, I'm just starting to droop a little bit and like looking forward to that long, slow winter.
Right. Like, are the cucumbers and tomatoes done yet?
Right. I know. You go from that place where you're so excited to see them start producing to this place where you're like, oh my gosh, more. What do I do with more?
I know. I need to go check the green beans. I think we were hoping they were done. I don't know if it's true or not.
Quality problems, right? When we have too much abundance.
Yeah, too many blessings. Yeah. I keep thinking that they're all blessings. They're all blessings.
Absolutely.
We just had those baseball bat size zucchinis.
Yeah.
I turned some of them into pizzas for lunch.
Oh, that's a good way to like slice them in rounds and use those as pizza crusts.
More like zucchini boats, I guess.
Oh, there you go.
But
okay.
Stuffed them with like pizza fillings and pizza sauce and lots of cheese, and they were great.
That's a good way to do it. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm excited because I'm going to try zucchini gnocchi for the first time this week. And I'm actually going to cook it and then freeze dry it. So I have a ready-made instant zucchini pasta all winter long. So I'm excited about that because I think that's going to be really good.
So do you spiralize it before you freeze dry it? Or how
for the zucchini, I kind of do it however, I pretty much for everything, I try to think about the end use of what I am freeze drying or dehydrating or even canning so that I can kind of reverse engineer what I want it to be. So for this, I'm actually gonna cook down the zucchini and then puree it and then mix it with the flour to make the pasta dough. And then make the gnocchi out of that. And then I'll go ahead and drop it in the boiling water and cook it. And then pull it out and drain it and put it on the freeze drying sheet. So it'll be a little bit of a process, but it's a really good one for kids because it becomes just about like Play-Doh and they're making, little Play-Doh snakes and then use the gnocchi board to actually make little spirals. So
that'll occupy them for a while.
Yeah, definitely. But I have dozens literally at this point of quart jars of shredded zucchini that's then been freeze dried on the shelf right now because we had an accident in the garden, a happy accident. We thought that my summer squash all disappeared. My summer squash starts all disappeared. And I actually thought, oh no, I didn't plant any. How did I forget?
Oh,
And
no.
so then I went to the local nursery and I got new zucchini starts and I filled the space that I had, which already has way too many spaces than any human being needs for zucchini. So we were already saying, okay, well, we'll be feeding the pig zucchini this summer. That's fine.
Turn
And
it
then
into bacon.
found all the rest of the summer squash that I had just
Oh, no.
accepted in my head. Oh, I made a mistake and I didn't plant them. And I kept going, how could I have made that mistake? But no, I had planted them, but somebody confused them for melons and planted them in the greenhouse. And so now we have double the amount of too much zucchini. So I'm like,
Oh,
we're feeding
no. And
pigs.
in the greenhouse. They're
Yes,
really happy in there.
everywhere. There is zucchini everywhere. So
Oh,
um,
well, I had a similar problem. I bought some starts and I thought they were zucchini because mine didn't look like they were going to do anything. And so I planted these starts and I'm like, they're not growing. What's wrong with them? Well, they were labeled wrong. They're pumpkins.
oh,
And they're in my raised garden bed.
oh no.
And there's four of them in there. Plants,
Wow.
pumpkin plants. And so they're like going all over because our garden is all raised beds.
Yeah.
And they're just going all over the place. And I've had to just start trimming like the leaves and the vines off so that they don't take over the whole entire garden because they were supposed to be zucchini and be a little more, contained. And so I planted zucchini and melons and squash all at the same time. And we never got a space prepped out of the beds for them in the ground before the conference in the summer. And so I didn't want the starts to die while we left. And I just planted them somewhere in the raised bed. So I've got melons with squash with zucchini and like an array of interesting things. So it's an experiment.
It sounds like a jungle. It sounds
Yeah.
like it's probably nice and full now.
Yeah. They didn't produce too much. They might have like one or two things on them. So I just been trimming off the jungle and
There you
letting the one or two things ripen. So it didn't go real great, but
That's a
gardening
good way.
problems. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, after you shred the zucchini and freeze dry it, how do you use that in recipes?
Zucchini to me is one of those things that it really just doesn't have a whole lot of flavor all by itself, at least a lot of really strong flavor, but it takes on the flavor of whatever you're cooking with it.
Right.
And so when I have freeze-dried zucchini like that, then I can just add it to pretty much anything, whether that's soups. What I found is that if I'm doing anything with ground meat, shredded zucchini will extend the meat, and most people don't ever even know that it's in there. So it's a really great way to just add some vegetables in to extend your meat, get to use a little less meat. But it's also an amazing way to be able to bake with it. So like we have this zucchini cinnamon bread that we love making. And so that's just a great way to go. So I pre-portion all of it. I have it already in, quart-sized jars so that it's perfectly 4 cups, so that we're able to just grab one jar and dump it in the bowl and go. And that works out really, really well. And the freeze-dried, that's just such an amazing method to use because it's like it takes it at its summer state and just suspends it in animation. And so it just is so good and so easy to work with. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. Do you reconstitute it before you bake with it, or does it just go straight in?
So something like zucchini where we're doing 4 cups and it's a huge percentage of the recipe, I would rehydrate it first. Otherwise, it's just going to make your baked goods super, super dry. So I would just give it a quick rehydrate. It only takes a minute or two for something like zucchini. And I don't measure or anything. I just eyeball it. I just put a little bit of water over it until it just kind of does its thing. And then it's ready to go right on into the baked good.
Nice. That was one of my questions about freeze drying is like, that part makes sense to me, but how do you reconstitute? Like, I know you do like lasagna or like full meals. How do you get it out of that freeze dried state when it's a solid thing like that.
Yeah, I think this is an area that really makes people nervous when they're talking about freeze drying. Honestly, even dehydrating, reconstituting it seems challenging. When it comes to freeze drying, it's actually really easy. I've tried all sorts of fancy methods like steaming things, and there's all sorts of crazy methods out there. And honestly, the method that works the best 99% of the time is just pouring some water over it. And so usually I give the rule of thumb that you want to kind of eyeball it and try to start with about a third of the volume in water or in a hot liquid. And you start there and pour it over it and give it a few minutes and come back to it. And if it still has little dry spots, you just add a little bit more water. So it's actually really simple. And when you start experimenting with it, it's really, really easy. And that's even things like lasagna slices, like those harder to do things. You just pour the water over. I mean, I've reconstituted chocolate cake with buttercream frosting that way, and it's turned out great. So you can do all sorts of things that you freeze dry and rehydrate, and just kind of eyeball it. That the real rule that you need to know about when it comes to rehydrating is that if it is raw, you use cold water, and it can take more time. Some things that are raw can take up to 12 hours to rehydrate. Specifically thinking like corn, if it's completely raw, it might take up to 12 hours to rehydrate. Green beans, if it's raw, take up to 12 hours to rehydrate. If it's a food that has been blanched or cooked, you want to use hot water, and it's usually almost instant rehydration.
Interesting.
And so that's kind of the rule of thumb. You need to kind of keep that in mind. The other fun thing about rehydration is, we're talking about water here, but you don't have to limit yourself to water when it comes to rehydrating something. If you think about rehydrating your apples in, what if you went with a cinnamon herbal tea?
Ooh,
like,
that'd be good.
Yeah,
you could drink it and eat the apples.
Right. And then what about like a chai spiced peach?
Ooh.
You can have a lot of fun with it. I mean, you get to your meat. What about your stew rehydrated with a little bit of red wine?
Right.
Like, or your chicken rehydrated with good chicken bone broth. Like, you can really get creative and do a lot with your rehydration. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. I like the tea idea, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Because when you're adding fruit to a dried tea, a dehydrated fruit, there's really no flavor when you're steeping in the water. So if you were going to take the freeze-dried fruit, you might get more flavor out of it than if you're dehydrating it. And I was going to ask you, what do you see the differences are between a regular dehydrator and a freeze-dried?
So when it comes down to the technical side, you have to kind of understand the way a freeze dryer works and a dehydrator works to really get a grasp of the difference. A dehydrator works by just blowing air over a food, and usually it's heated at least slightly, right? Usually it's warmed up a little bit. And so it's sucking that air out really by evaporation. When you're freeze drying, you're using a process called sublimation. And what that essentially does is it takes your food, and then your freeze dryer is going to drop that food way, way down. So to like negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. When that happens, then a vacuum pump kicks on, and that drops the atmospheric pressure way down, super low, like the equivalent of being out on the moon type of low.
Which is why it's called moon cheese.
Which is why it's called moon cheese, exactly. But if you think about it, as you go up in elevation, water boils at a lower temperature, right? So this is why there's different canning times based on your elevation. So if you're way up at 5,000 feet, your water may not boil at 212 degrees. It may actually boil at 200 degrees or 205. I'm sure there's a scientific, like we could look up exactly
Right.
what temperature it boils at. I don't know that. But when you drop your atmospheric pressure all the way down to the equivalent of being out in outer space, your water will boil and start evaporating, turning to gas, essentially at this like negative 40 degrees.
That's crazy.
So what that means you're doing is you're evaporating the liquid off of your food even while it's frozen. So it never turns back into a liquid state. It never heats the food while it has the liquid in it, which means that it preserves the cellular structure of the food. So let's say you talk about like a strawberry. If you look at a dehydrated strawberry, it's kind of shriveled. They're flat. Yeah. They're kind of, shrivelly, maybe a little darker looking. It's kind of oxidized in the process because of the heat, right? When you look at freeze-dried strawberries, if you don't touch them, you could think that that is an absolutely fresh strawberry, even though it is completely freeze-dried, because it completely holds its shape and for the most part, its color and it's, all the visual cues to you, it looks the same. That's because those cell walls have not been broken. So it locks in the nutrition, which also means flavor in a very different way. Hydrating. So, they're both really viable, really great preservation methods, but because the cellular structure stays the same in the freeze-dried food, you get more fresh flavor out of it. You also get way more nutrition out of it, which is really important. Our food now is so lacking nutrition that every bit more we can get out of it's important.
For sure. Yeah. So it just kind of suspends it in time that way then.
It really does. What I think is really fascinating, though, is that because it dries it to about 99 point something % dry, that means when you put the water back into it, it actually infuses better because it has more space for the water to go into and to actually move in and out of. So for me, I feel like between the two methods, if you're wanting an infusion of some sort, you're going to get a much better process with freeze drying. You're going to get a final tea or infusion that's much better when you're using freeze dried.
We get that question a lot. Can you use freeze dried fruit in your tea? And I think we've chatted about this before, but the problem seems to come into you have to pick one or the other. They're either all dehydrated or they're all freeze dried. And maybe you can talk more about why that is when you're getting into the bag or mixing the two things together in terms of, moisture in the air and such.
Yeah. So dehydrated foods, including fruits or spices or anything like that, they get dried to about a 95% dry percentage if they're nice and dry. So, that's pretty dry, but it's not nearly as dry as 99.5% your freeze dried is going to get. So what happens if you mix the two together? Let's say you mix them together in a 50-50 ratio, volume ratio, then you're going to have that kind of, osmosis process where everything in the bag is going to even out as far as moisture content.
Right.
So that dehydrated stuff is going to give some of its moisture to the freeze-dried stuff. And then you're going to start to lose quality really quickly on your freeze-dried food. You really don't want it to get moisture added back into it until you're ready to rehydrate it. Same thing with like having a bag of freeze-dried fruit and maybe not vacuum sealing it, but just leaving it open. It is so dry that it is literally sucking moisture out of the air. And because those cellular pockets are so available, they're still there, even though they're empty. They take on that moisture so easily, so much more easily than a dehydrated food, that they'll just like suck the moisture out of the air and then they'll start to go bad. So there is this element with freeze-dried food that you do need to keep them dry.
Which is part of the problem with like putting it in a tea is if we have, say, an extract in there, that's a liquid, an alcohol or whatever. Yeah. And it's going to affect that a lot faster. A lot faster.
What you could do is do a full mix of it, and then you would freeze dry the whole thing after the fact to take something from a dehydrated level to a freeze dried dry level. And then you could do that. But of course, that's a huge extra step of process.
Yeah. What's the, when you're getting in and out of a container, freeze dried, whatever it may be, if it's fruit or whatever, how many times can you get in and out of that container before you need to seal it again?
It depends on so many factors. Number one is the humidity in your environment. So, if you live in the deep South and it's summer and it is just dripping humidity, you're going to get in that thing one time and you're going to have to call it good. And just eat it all or reseal it really carefully. If you live somewhere like, where I grew up, oftentimes our humidity levels were in the single digits. That, I could probably just about leave it out on the shelf and I'd be good for several weeks, right? So it really depends on a lot of things. But packaging is something that's really important with freeze-dried food. And when I teach freeze drying, I teach packaging in 3 different ways. I teach it really long-term, like up to 25 years. We're making our prepper pantry, right? And we want to stash all this food for the apocalypse. So that's one method of storing your food. Then we have the medium-term storage, which is like up to 5 years. It's kind of more the, hey, I want to harvest my garden and put up enough food for winter and maybe enough in case next year's crop doesn't end up being great, and then we have what we call snacking storage. And this is where, like, I'm kind of figuring I'm going to take this jar of freeze-dried fruit. I want to put it into some method that we can just get into and pretty much eat within 2 weeks, but still keep it good in that window. And to do that, I have you put your food into a sealed but openable jar. So like, think of like a Fido jar with the rings, the gaskets on it, or like Ball now sells these jars. They're actually more like food canisters. And they have or they even sell the lids that are the little wood looking lids that go on your regular jars, but they have the little rubber seal.
Love those. I have a whole stash right here behind me waiting.
That's perfect. But so you put your food in that, but instead of putting your regular oxygen absorber in there and then sealing the whole thing down, instead you'd put a desiccant package, like a silica food grade silica desiccant package. And you put that in there just to help it keep from building up any moisture. And then you just get into it when you want, stick the lid back on, and try to eat it up within about 2 weeks.
Yeah. So if you were going to freeze dry tea, you might use that option.
Yeah, that's definitely what I would do.
Yeah. Well, that was like my second thought was, well, one, we can't combine the two together because that's going to cause us moisture issues. And then 2, if it was in there and we're in and out of it all the time because we're getting in there for tea every day, is that going to work? So I guess that option would work. I had another question and I forgot.
Well, and there are cases where you can combine the two, if the majority of your food is freeze dried or is something that's dries really, really dry and isn't going to give up its moisture. Some spices are like that. They're really dry.
Yeah. Maybe some of the more woody types.
Yeah. Then I would be totally comfortable with that myself. And your way to know is just, does your freeze dried food get soft?
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. How do you know if it goes bad?
Yeah, if freeze-dried food, when it's properly dried, is like crispy, crunchy, breakable sort of thing. And so it's really easy to tell if something is like beyond prime. If it's kind of gone past its best mark, or if you've done something wrong, you just tell because you pick it up and it's flexible instead of breakable.
Be more like a dehydrated food. So at that point, is it just a texture issue? Is it still something you could rehydrate and use, or it's just that's really going to depend on the food it is, because here's another thing about freeze drying is that it does not kill bacteria during the freeze drying process.
So this is phenomenal news if you want to freeze dry your kombucha and have a great probiotic powder.
I was going to ask you that question.
Or, freeze dry your sourdough starter, or maybe some fermented vegetables, or even your yogurt for a yogurt starter.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, this is kind of a side note, but we've started freeze drying our yogurt because when you have this yogurt powder, if you just add a little bit of water to it, it rehydrates as a mock cream cheese.
Ooh.
That is to die for. It is so smooth and spreadable. But then if you add a little bit more water, then you get this great, like, thick Greek yogurt. And if you add a little bit more, you get like a normal texture yogurt. And then if you add even more than that, you get like a yogurt drink out of it. And it's like all the same thing, and you can rehydrate it, but it's all
water.
Yeah, with just water, but it's all probiotic rich still. The downside of that whole thing, though, is that, if you start with something like salmonella or E. coli in some of your foods, you end with in your food, and that gets reanimated as soon as it gets enough moisture to be able to start growing and living again.
Yeah.
So when you go in and you grab your food and it's something high acid like a fruit, and you go, oh, it's a little flexible. Hey, I know that's so high acid that really no bacteria can live in there to begin with.
Right.
So if it went bad, what I'd see would be mold, right? You have the acidity issue. If it's something like vegetables, especially a vegetable that's been in the ground, or it's something like meats, a protein of some sort, and you go and it's flexible, or it's soft, or it's sticky or mushy, then you go, don't even want to touch it. Don't even try, because it's low acid, so bacteria can survive in that environment.
So if that meat was cooked, you wouldn't have the risk as much as if you're freeze drying something raw.
Yes and no. I mean, it can still take on bacteria.
Right. Yeah.
So anything with protein, I would be 100% sure that it's dry. But again, that's so easy because it just crispy. So you have no question. As long as it's crispy.
Well, you have me excited about the fermented part, because I have to tell you, I don't have a freeze dryer. And I've been on the dehydrating camp. So my sister-in-law is a freeze dryer, and she freeze dries some eggs for me because, those don't dehydrate, So,
well, you remember Dr. Mercola years ago did a study where he took some homemade sauerkraut and found that I think it was a teaspoon of homemade sauerkraut had more probiotic power in it than his best bottled probiotics that cost, probably $60 a bottle or something like that. And so you immediately start going, wait, I can get more probiotic powder if I freeze dry my sauerkraut, or even the leftover sauerkraut juice. Take that powder, put it in a capsule, and then consume that. But it's going to cost like a complete fraction of the cost to get even better results. I love things like that.
Well, that's a great way to pay for your freeze dryer really fast, because you're saving all that money on those probiotics.
Totally.
So one of my thoughts is, what about, can you freeze dry your herbs and then capsulize them? Does a capsule keep the moisture out enough to be able to do that? Have you tried that?
I think so, especially if you're, got a desiccant package in your jar where you're storing them, or an oxygen absorber, one or the other. If it's
in a bottle or a jar where you keep them,
Yeah. So between a desiccant package and having it nicely bottled, that should be fine. Just like everything, you just close it down every time you use it
and keep the moisture out.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Yeah.
Freeze-dried kombucha powder is exciting to me.
There's a lot. Your brain starts working on it, and you're like,
electrolyte powder for hiking or traveling, and it removes that. I just did a podcast with Lisa Bass, and we spent a lot of time talking about exploding kombucha bottles or other ferments, and that would you'd still get the benefit, but you wouldn't have to worry about that when traveling with your kombucha.
Yeah, definitely.
So that would be great. If you're going on a vacation or something and you don't have access to your fermented food.
Hey, you know, another thing that you can do is you can do instant teas from your freeze dryer. So you just make your tea. I tend to recommend making your tea like double strength because you're going to get more out of every freeze dryer run if you do that.
Right.
But you make your tea about double strength and then you freeze dry that. And what you're left with is a powder, which is your instant tea. So, you know, you're talking about that. What if you want an instant iced tea little packet that's healthy to put into your bottle while you're out hiking?
Yeah. You don't need a tea bag.
You don't need a tea bag. You don't, you know, and it becomes an instant rehydrate.
Right.
So you don't need to fuss with all of the stuff. You just pour the powder in, mix it up, and you've got tea.
Right. And no additives.
No,
no coloring.
Nice? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh no. I might have to find somewhere for a freeze dryer.
Yeah. You know, it's one of those things that when you first get it, it's kind of intimidating and you start going, you know, what am I using this for? Like, why do I have this thing? But then as you start experimenting with it, it's like all these little light bulb moments go off. You know, one of the things we're doing right now is we're putting up a lot of wide mouth pint jars in meals so that they're really easy grab and go meals. It's like, hey, somebody feels like chicken pot pie for lunch when they have to run off to the office. You know, now we have kids going all over the place. We've got one working, two working full time, one married, one not. And, you know, sometimes you just need like a quick grab and go meal. And so it's like we're getting shelves of meals put up where it's like just a single serving. You just grab it and you dump in some hot water and it's in those jars. So it's easy to just like you have your dish, you have your rehydration, you know.
It's all in one.
It's all in one. It's all super easy. So that's what we're playing with.
Are you freeze drying the parts of the recipe and then putting it in the jar? Is that here?
We cook the meal.
Okay.
Cook the meal. So if you think about, you know, let's say spaghetti, you make the meal, you put it together. You can even put a little Parmesan cheese on top and then you freeze dry that whole thing. And all you need to do is add some water to rehydrate it. A favorite in our house is chicken pho. And so good noodles. And so you do that and you even freeze dry the broth with it, which becomes your instant broth. So you just make the meal. And, you know, the easiest way to do this is you just make a little extra at dinner time. And then you go ahead and you freeze dry that and you end up with instant meals ready to go. The one caveat to this, you can freeze dry pretty much everything. You just want to keep it low fat. Otherwise it will go rancid because, you know, fat doesn't freeze dry or dehydrate. It's the same thing with dehydration.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the same as dehydrating. You don't want to stick a bunch of fat in the dehydrator.
So if I'm making spaghetti for dinner and I'm cooking up some, say, sausage for that, I'll just rinse the sausage in hot water afterwards just to keep it lower fat.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I have another question for you. I can't seem to remember the meals are really interesting to me because it seems like everyone just wants to freeze dry candy.
Oh gosh, I know. And yeah, I got to tell you, Cian, I just filmed a whole freeze drying class and everybody wanted to know how to freeze dry candy. And so I kind of rolled my eyes and said, okay, I will film the video. So we went to the grocery store to go get all this candy. And I sent one of my kids and I said, I don't know, get enough to freeze dry a couple trays for the class. And so they ended up pretty much buying out the store of about 5 different types of candy. So they came home with these giant bags of like gummy nerds, which we don't eat candy in the house.
I've never heard of a gummy nerd.
Oh my gosh. Mostly because I will eat them if it's in the house. Like I just don't even let them in the house. Like no candy in the house. So we now currently have 8 gallons of freeze-dried candy down in the basement. And we went to one of the dances that we have in our community. About every month, somebody will put on a dance that all the kids and families go to. And it's, you know, usually an old-fashioned country dance. And I did it. I brought a gallon of freeze-dried candy and put it out on the table for the kid. I kind of slid it in there when nobody was watching, so they didn't know I was
It
attached.
wasn't me that got it.
It wasn't me. But I mean, they're gonna know by the end of the season, because every single dance there's gonna be this jar or this bowl of freeze-dried candy. I'm like, get rid of it. Give it to these children that are dancing so hard they're gonna burn off all that sugar in an hour anyways. Oh well.
You might have to. I don't know. I was gonna say you could sell it.
Yeah, I know. It's like, no, let's get rid of it. But
Right.
but yeah, the meals definitely are so much more valuable than that.
Right.
And you think about how expensive it is to run out and get some convenience food. And not only expensive, but I mean, what is in that stuff anyways? You don't even want to know. It's about like the candy, really. It's like, who knows what's in here? So when you have your own that's come from your own home cooking to begin with, it's healthy, it's flavors your family love, it's great. And then you freeze dry it and you have it sitting on your shelf so you can grab it and use it whenever you need it. You want to talk about paying for the price of your machine. It doesn't take too many meals a week to within a year pay off your machine. I think we did the math one time, and we figured for a family of 4, if they replaced one meal that they didn't go out and buy a convenience meal, it was one meal a week. Instead, they went ahead and made their own and freeze dried it. Even considering the cost of electricity for the freeze dryer and all the ingredients of the homemade food, it took about a year for that family to pay for their machine in savings. So it doesn't take much to pay for it.
Right. And all you're doing is making a little extra at dinner time to do that.
Yep. Yeah. I figure I can put 8 servings, very healthy adult size servings of lasagna on a tray for my large size freeze dryer. My freeze dryer holds 5 trays. So that's 40 servings of lasagna that I can do in one freeze dryer load.
Wow.
And that's going to cost about $5 of electricity where I live. Of course that changes based on electricity rates.
Right.
But, so for the work of just making a couple of extra lasagnas, I've got 40 servings of convenience food just sitting in my pantry.
Right.
And, even if you went to the grocery store and you got frozen lasagna and you did this, you would have it sitting there waiting for you, which is it's great. It's a really good feeling to have that food just about instant ready.
Right.
You have
ready to go. Well, and you never know, like, is someone in the family going to get sick, mom or dad, or someone's out of commission or you're having a baby,
Yeah.
It's good to have that ready to go. You don't have to cook. I know in the past we've had to resort to grabbing pizza to bring home or something, and it would be better to already have some food to just grab. But, if mom's sick, dad doesn't figure out how to make dinner.
Yeah, this makes it so easy. It's just really simple.
Right. Yep. Let's see. I have a list of questions for you if I got them all.
All right.
Okay. Your favorite and your least favorite freeze-dried food.
Okay. My favorite freeze-dried food. Oh my goodness. That's okay. I mean, favorite taste-wise for my class, we freeze-dried cheesecake and 4 different flavors of Jenny's ice cream. I mean, amazing. Lemon blueberry parfait ice cream freeze-dried is like, it's 10 times better than the non-freeze-dried version. So taste-wise, those are great. Dessert always is though, right? I think for me, I don't know, there's something magical about fresh, garden fresh strawberries that have then been freeze-dried at the peak of season. It's like the freeze drying.
I've had them before.
Yeah, the freeze drying intensifies the flavor. And so it is just like strawberry flavor galore, but it's just strawberries. And so that to me is amazing. As far as what I love having in the house, it's those meals. Tell you what, freeze-dried chicken pot pie tastes like chicken pot pie. Like it tastes fresh when you put that rehydrate it. It just tastes like you just made a chicken pot pie, and it is amazing. So the meals for me are some of my favorite. Some of my least favorite. I do not like green beans that have been freeze dried that were raw to begin with.
Oh, interesting.
Once they're blanched, I think they're great. But if they're raw and then freeze dried, they take forever to rehydrate. They never get the right texture, and their flavor just is not amazing. So that's the thing I don't like. I think I'm trying to think if
And
there's
the candy.
yeah, and the candy. I don't like the candy because I like it too much, and it's
Right.
just that crunch is so much fun.
I used to be like that with M&Ms before I realized that I had a sugar allergy. Now I just don't anymore. But yeah, M&Ms. To keep those away. So your class is coming out or is out?
Yeah, we have a complete class that is out all on freeze drying, takes you through every single step of setting up your machine, doing your first runs on your machine, how to maintain your machine and your pump, and through all different types of foods and exactly what you need to know to be able to successfully dehydrate them and rehydrate them later. So the class is all out, and the book is now just about.
I was hoping you were going to bring that. I got an email that mine's coming in the mail soon.
Ooh, that's exciting. Yay. So yeah, they're just about to be released. I think they ship out on the 24th here, which is a couple days. And so this is really exciting. And this again has all the steps. Something really fun about the book though, and I love this because I use this section all the time. There is a whole section in here. There's obviously all the steps and how to do everything. But there's a whole section here that's called the Encyclopedia of Freeze Drying Food. And it's like we start with apples. And it tells you everything you need to know about freeze drying and rehydrating and storing freeze dried apples. It starts with, on every single one of these things, we start with how many pounds you will need to purchase in order to be able to freeze dry a whole tray's amount with it. So that's important, or get out of your garden or your orchard or wherever it is. Because, you know, if you start with so many different foods have waste attached to them, right? Like if you start with an orange, by the time you buy an orange and then you go home, you have to peel it. You know, maybe you're taking the seeds out if you want it seedless. So you end up with a lot of waste. So it's a little hard to tell, well, how much do I actually need to purchase to end up with this final amount?
Right.
We go through that for every single food. Clams, coffee, colostrum, coleslaw mix. I mean, we cover cottage cheese.
Everything in there.
Everything that we can think of.
Like just a quick pickup.
It is. So it's really easy to give you all the information you need.
Nice. I like how big it is.
Yes.
There's a lot in there, and it's a hardcover, and it looks beautiful from here.
And look at that.
Look at that. Those are like my favorite kind of books.
Especially in the kitchen, you know, because it's like you don't want to have to fight with the pages when you're in the kitchen.
Right. And then like the paper covers, I always seem to ruin those in the kitchen. Yeah. The hard covers seem a bit more durable. So.
These are very wipeable. You can wipe all the, you know, spilled.
You say that like you have experience already.
Yes. But from experience, I will tell you that the pages will stick together if you don't dry it after you spill kombucha on it. So.
Well, that's good to know. I might use that. All right. You want to share with everyone where they can find the class and your book before we go? And anything else you want to share?
Well, I'll let you drop a link in the video description for wherever. So you can go to Amazon and grab the book. You can grab the book over at homesteadliving.com and follow the link for the class that's
I'll put that down below for everybody. So it's exciting. Perfect. Yeah, because they go together, right? The book and the class.
They can. They're also both totally standalone.
So if you learn better by reading, maybe the book, or if you just want the reference that's printed, which is probably what I'll do with it, and follow the videos in the class. I like both.
I do too. I love learning by watching, but then for reference, having it on hand in paper.
Right, to look it up. So you don't have to watch the whole thing to look up the one
little
thing
bit that you need.
Yeah, yep, exactly. All right. Well, it was good to chat with you today. And y'all can find Carolyn at Homesteading Family on YouTube. But my guess is that most of you probably already know she's there if you're here at our channel. Thank you for chatting today. And I'm going to be stocking my mailbox for my books.
Ooh. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. Good to visit.
The thing that I love about Carolyn, as you could probably tell in our chat, is that she is an excellent teacher. She used to actually teach in a public school. And so she has lots of experience teaching people how to do lots of things, from canning to fermenting, all things homestead. But I especially want you to check out her freeze drying course, especially if you already own a freeze dryer. If you are not sure about freeze drying, like maybe you have questions like I did, like how am I going to use this and is it worth the money? I hope Carolyn answered a lot of those questions for you because it was certainly helpful for me. Go ahead and look at her book and check out their blog at homesteadingfamily.com. And she has tons of freeze drying resources there if you're not quite ready to jump in yet. I hope that you enjoyed our little chat. And if you would like to see more podcasts like this or video podcasts, please make sure to let us know. You can either email us at howdy@farmhouseteas.com and let us know, or maybe drop down if you're watching this on YouTube. Drop down in the comments below who you would like to see on our next video podcast. And I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.